Let's learn about needle felting. This is a dry fiber arts process. So these are examples of needle felted works. Some of them are three-dimensional, some of them are two-dimensional. Yes, if you do an internet search, a lot of needle felted work looks really cute, but you don't necessarily have to make your things look cute. So what is needle felting? It is a craft that involves the tangling of wool using barbed needles. As the wool is tangled, the material becomes more compact. Needle felting is a dry felting technique. So if you have ever accidentally shrunk a piece of clothing in the washing machine or dryer, that is a felting process. There are two types of needle felting. The first one is sculptural, which would be 3D. So the wool material is compacted into 3D forms. And then there's applique, which is 2D. This is when the wool material is felted onto a flat piece of wool or felt. It's kind of like painting, but with wool. So what is felt? It's a textile material that is produced by matting, condensing, and pressing the fibers together. And felt can be made of natural fibers, such as from wool or animal, or synthetic where it's plastic-based types. So this is sculptural felting, where you're creating 3D forms. This is applique felting, so you are using the felting process on a flat piece of felt. So there's three main materials that are needed for needle felting. They are a foam pad. This is the cushion. This is the surface that you use when you're needle felting. You'll need a felting needle, and note that it's a special type of needle. They do sell different sizes, and they have barbs, and that is what the wool pulls onto. And you need wool, specifically roving wool. And we have lots of different colors. You can see how you can actually see the fibers that are organized. So you want to use wool. This is before it's been used for anything, but it's called roving wool. Additional materials that you might use depending on the project: flat sheets of felt, right? This is already felted, okay? So it's wool or material. It's already been felted, but you can actually do the needle felting process on top of felt. You might also use yarn. Yarn is made of wool or some synthetic material, but it's already been felted or organized. You might also use pipe cleaners and styrofoam shapes, wire, and craft eyes. Wire helps create a structure. Craft eyes help create those cute little eyes. So how does the needle felting process work? As you poke the needle through the bundle of wool, the barbs grab the fibers and they tangle them with other fibers. The felting needle pulls the wool into itself, and you do this repeatedly with that barbed needle. The back and forth motion of the needle with the wool tangles the wool fibers repeatedly, further compacting them. And you can see there, right, these are the loose fibers, and there they are getting all compacted together. And we can see some images here of the process. So yes, it is a hands-on process when you're needle felting. So to create complex forms, such as humans or multi-limbed animals, the parts are typically needle felted separately, and then they're felted together. So a little needle felting history. Felted wool is one of the oldest known textiles. Felting actually started in the mid-17th century to create quality felt for clothing, and the fibers used ranged from camel hair to wild animal fur. And during the Industrial Revolution in 1825, this would be in America, the first large-scale felting machine was invented by J.R. Williams, which pressed together a huge pile of batting between two rollers, as you can see there. In the 1980s, the felting needle was created by these artisans who took a tool from the woolen mill industry to use it on a small scale and began needle felting by hand. So yes, the process of needle felting has been around since the 1980s. And this is obviously an example of all those needles used at a much more industrial, large scale. The majority of the wool does come from sheep. You can actually get your own wool from the sheep and use it as is. So these are some cool needle felting facts. Needle felting, as I noted, as a craft, dates back to the 1980s. There is also a technique called wet felting, which involves the use of water and agitation of the wool to shrink the wool into a specific shape or size. So that is a different process. Needle felting can be used to make a range of items, such as dolls, animals, jewelry, and decorative items. Needle felting can be seen as therapeutic and can help release stress and anxiety, but at the same time, needle felting requires patience and precision. So the more effort you put into the process, the more satisfying the results will be. Now, is it possible to overfelt my work? Sometimes. So when you're felting, you're aiming for a finish that is firm enough to keep its shape and form, but still has some squishiness. So if your form is super hard, like it's hard to squish, you probably overfelted your work. If your form is super squishy, you have not felted it enough. Safety is very important when needle felting. The felting needles are very sharp. Those barbs hurt if they get into your skin, so always keep an eye on your project and your fingers when poking. Try to keep your fingers and hand away from the path of the needle, and you want to keep that foam pad and your project on the table. Do not needle felt with the project in your lap or in the air. You don't want that needle going through the pad into your lap. Always poke and withdraw the needle in the same straight direction. Never try to stab with a curve, since that can potentially break or bend the needle, and that's usually why needles eventually break. They also just break due to usage. You also do not want to use your felting needle to pick at or pry the fibers of your project apart, since this can cause your needle to snap. Some other tips. When you're a beginner, start slow. Do not work fast and frantic, because this is how you can poke yourself. Pay attention to what you are doing. Now, it is not necessary to stab the needle deep into the wool. This actually takes more time and energy. And at the end of each class period, make sure you return the needle to the appropriate place when you're done. It's really easy to break or lose the needle if it's not stored properly. And if you notice your needle becomes rusty, we do need to toss it out. Now, if you do poke your finger with the needle, it's going to happen. It's important that we sanitize the needle and take care of your finger. Please inform me if there is any blood that we need to clean up. Now, the best way to learn needle felting is through practice. Okay, so in this demo, you're going to see a little bit of 2D and 3D needle felting. So what you'll need is your foam cushion or pad. This is the surface that we do the needle felting on. And you'll need your needle. Again, everyone's going to have a needle assigned to them, and just, be aware it is sharp, it is barbed. And for the purpose of this demo, I'm going to actually start with a flat piece of felt just to show you that the 2D process is called applique, because we are applying the wool onto the felt itself. So the type of wool we use is called roving wool, and as you can tell from here, you can see how there's like streaks of it. That's because it's been brushed and organized a certain way. So that's what we're going to use. And when you start practicing, you're going to notice that a little bit of wool goes a long way. You do not need a lot of it, because you can always add more. And before you actually apply it onto the flat surface, you want to actually organize it in some way. If it doesn't quite organize for you, you can add a little water to your fingertips to kind of help move it around. And then we are going to take our needle. So remember, when you are poking your wool, we want to poke and withdraw the needle in the same straight direction. We don't want to curve it, because that's what's going to end up breaking your needle potentially, or poking you. We want to go up and down. And then I just start poking. And you can see as I poke, the fibers of the wool become a little more compacted. And right now it is flattening kind of into the felt itself. And you can see, if I pull it up, you can see how these pieces here, that's what's being poked through. So I can still manipulate the shape, but also I want to keep track of where my fingers are. Now, what's cool about working flat is you can actually pull it off the felt if you need to fix it or reconfigure it. And again, we're just poking up and down. Do not poke sideways. This is what often happens when you're felting a 3D form, but as well as 2D, we shouldn't be poking sideways. You want to poke up and down, because if you poke sideways, that's how you end up poking your finger. Now, after you apply some of the wool, if you realize you need a little bit more, you can always pull out some more and again, shape it right here. But you do have to pay attention, because right now I'm trying to poke all these wool fibers in. We want to use short pokes. You don't need to poke very deep into the material. It's the constant up and down poking that helps create the felting process. Now there is a question of overfelting. Is it possible to overfelt? So if you felt something to the point where you can hardly squeeze it, like this shape, this form, it's probably overfelted. Now if I take this sphere here and I squeeze it, see how it's really squishy? You probably need to keep felting it, and it just depends on what you're creating as to how felted you want it to be. So at this point I can add a second color if I want to. Again, I can pull off some of the wool and I can shape it, position it in the way I want to, add a little water to my fingers to kind of help bunch it up. And I can take this, and let's say I want to lay it on top. This is how you start to incorporate another color in the felting process. And again, if you mess up, you can just pull it off and start again. Now, for a quick demo on the sculptural process, this is creating 3D things out of the felt. For this demo, I'm just going to use some color. So I'm going to use this here. And again, a little bit of felt goes a long way. You can always add more, kind of like when you're working with clay, you can always add a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ball it up. And just for this quick little demo here, we're just going to make a little bit of a ball. Now, I do not have a piece of felt because I'm not making something flat. I'm trying to make something 3D. And it's the same idea though. You're poking into the felt, but now when it's 3D, you have to keep rotating it in order to achieve that form that you're trying to create. And if it's not quite working, you can actually take some more felt. So you can take some more wool and you can actually bind it. You can cover it. This is when you really have to watch out though, where your fingers are. If you just keep stabbing and you're not paying attention, it can flatten out. So that's why you kind of have to keep rotating it on the cushion. And you can see as you keep rotating it, you start creating more of a form.